everybody's here, but we figured it out. It's very nice to see everyone. I feel like I've just missed everybody. It's been so long since I've seen everybody. So let me, just want to get a couple things up here. I had.
I'm good.
Okay. So,
All right.
1, 2, 5, 6, 7.
No.
I think we're ready to get started. We ready? Okay, great. All right. Thanks for everyone's patience. With a quorum present, I would like to call this meeting of the Co-op Budget Committee to order at 6:41 p.m. This is a regular meeting for the month of April for the Co-op Budget Committee, and the agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance of the meeting as required. The electronic format of this meeting is in accordance with New Hampshire Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, which allows a meeting format and does not require a quorum board to be physically present at a specific meeting location. For purposes of this meeting, I'm the only co-op board member present at Carlsbrook Lane Middle School, and the meeting in this Zoom format is being live streamed, and Mark is here recording. He'll take some live shots of me sitting here just to show that somebody was physically present at the middle school. So I'll introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the Budget Committee members who are present for tonight's meeting, which include Tom Everett, Brian, Matt McGuire, Cindy Van Conen, Raul Blanchet, Lauren Rickstrom. Dave Lynn has an excused absence for this meeting, and I would like to introduce and thank Kelly Steele, our VA, and Drew, our moderator, for participating in the meeting tonight. So with that said, I just we had 2 computers set up here, and that was going to work perfectly until it didn't. So I'm just going to pull up my agenda. And so in accordance with this format, every vote that we take has to be in a roll call fashion, just so that the votes are recorded correctly. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind as the meeting gets underway. I'm going to jump ahead and just ask if anyone has any agenda adjustments at this time. Seeing none, I'm going to move to the next order of business, which is the reorganization of the Budget Committee. So some of the information I sent out earlier with the agenda included a few different emergency orders. And one of those emergency orders addressed the election of officers and them being sworn in. And typically that doesn't occur until after we've had our annual district meeting. We haven't had the district meeting, but there were emergency orders put out by the governor in the midst of this situation that allowed for Zoom, that allowed a lot of things, including electronic or Zoom swearing in of members, and that we can move ahead and do that in advance of a district meeting. So with that in mind, Raul and Dave were sworn in by Drew in, I'll say early April. That's probably when the orders came out, but I had confirmation from Drew that they've been sworn in. And so we can go ahead and proceed with our normal reorganization, even though we haven't had a district meeting, because that would have been the first order of business of our April meeting, or the meeting after the district meeting. So with that in mind, I will open the floor to take nomination for the chair, vice chair, and secretary at this time.
I would nominate Darlene as the chair.
Second.
So that was nominated by Lauren, seconded by Brian. Thank you. Any other nominations at this time?
You kidding?
Okay. I don't ever recall how I do this every year, but I'll just, if there's no discussion, I'll bring the nomination to a vote. So all those in favor of Darlene Mann or myself continuing as chair for the Co-op Budget Committee for the next year. I'll
Aye.
go through Tom. Tom is
Aye.
yes. Brian,
Yes.
Matt. Matt looked like yes. I thought you were muted, Matt.
Okay, yes.
Great. Cindy,
Yes.
Raul,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I look forward to another great year working with all of you. So we have a lot to catch up on and a lot to look forward to. So thank you. At this time, I'll open the floor to nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Raul for vice chair.
Okay. Raul
I'll
is nominated
second.
for vice chair by Lauren, seconded by Brian. Any other nominations or discussion? Tom?
None.
Seeing none, I'll bring the nomination to a vote. So all those, anyone in favor of Raul as vice chair? Tom?
Yes.
Tom is yes. Brian?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Raul?
Yes.
Vote for yourself. Lauren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Great. Congratulations. Thank you, Raul.
Thank you very much for your confidence.
And
Look forward
moving
to
on
another
to,
good year.
great. Moving on to secretary. I'll accept nominations for secretary for the co-op. Lauren?
I nominate Matt.
I'll second.
Nominated by Matt's nominated by Lauren, seconded by Brian. In all fairness, Matt sent me a note in advance of this meeting, which we can address as the meeting gets underway, about the time and attention that it takes to put out the minutes in their amazing fashion. The minutes are fantastic, Matt, that you put together. But Matt did bring up the point about possibly having our minutes done by Dawn McMillan, who does all of the minutes for does she do them for all of the boards, like for the co-op and the Brookline board?
Well, yeah, I know the
Yes.
co-op, the SAU, and Brookline. I assume
Yeah.
Hollis as well.
Okay.
The governing board.
And the governing board. So, and I believe on the Hollis Budget Committee side, there is somebody that they have that, because the Hollis Budget Committee does town and school, that their person does it. So we're kind of the outlier in that we're the only one who has actually a member doing the minutes. So I would support Matt's request that and Matt, maybe you could talk a little bit to, I'm not sure if you sent it to everybody, but I saw the
No,
email.
I just sent it to you as a future topic because I did ask Andy about this probably 2-3 months ago at a school board meeting. You know, I kind of said, hey, how come the finance co-op budget committee doesn't do minutes like all the other boards? He said that would be an option. We could do it. It'd probably be, I think, $300 to $400 a year. He said. So we would need to have that much money in the budget to cover the minutes.
Okay.
Kelly probably knows a little more how much it is per meeting. I don't know if it's was like $30 or $35 or something like that. I don't remember the exact cost, but Andy thought it'd be like $300 or a little more per year to cover our meetings.
That's probably about right. I mean, I think we pay her hourly, so it's going to depend on how many meetings you have and how long they are. But yeah, we can certainly add something to the budget.
Okay. So Matt, would you
So,
say conditionally approve the
No,
secretary as we kind of work through the details of that?
No, I'm okay with it, and I think that I don't know if this would have to be literally a FY21 thing, for having a line item in the budget before they could actually kick in. But that is something I think we'd want to maybe migrate towards going forward. But I know it'll probably be several months before we could even consider that. But
Well, summer's coming up and we don't meet all summer, so that's good.
Yep. Yeah. No. So I'm okay.
Okay, good. Okay, so any other discussion about Matt as secretary? He's willing to continue. Okay, seeing none.
Well, I guess a brief discussion is thank you, Matt, for agreeing to do that. And yes, we do need to have somebody take minutes because it's not fair to Matt to take minutes and also try to participate in the meeting. It's just not workable. So
Mhm.
Yeah, okay,
we
thank
need to
you.
get
Yeah,
that done.
that was one of the concerns I expressed in the email to Darlene is that, trying to take minutes that takes me out of the actively being involved as much as I'd like to be in the discussions.
Right.
So and the same thing for whoever does the minutes. I think it, that kind of would happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I support transferring that responsibility to a regular minute taker.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay.
Well, seeing no additional discussion and lots of agreement on the recommendation, not only of Matt as the secretary, but of a kind of a transition plan, I'll bring the motion to a vote. So for those in favor of Matt continuing as secretary, Tom,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Raul,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Great. Thank you all very much. We're officially reorganized, and we can move ahead to next budget item, which is approval of minutes from the 123 meeting, which seems like ages ago at this point. So I'll take a motion to bring the minutes to the floor for approval.
Okay, so I did see the minutes that Raul sent out, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if everybody else had a chance to see that yet.
Raul, did your changes go to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
They did. Okay.
Yeah. I'd move the minutes as amended.
Okay, great. Motion from Lauren. Is there a second?
Raul, yes.
From Raul.
Second.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the roll to approve the minutes of the January 23rd meeting as amended. Tom,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Cindy.
I don't think I was at that one. So I'm
Okay, so you're
gonna
abstaining.
abstain.
Okay. Raul,
Well, actually, I need to abstain also because I think I was traveling that day.
Yes.
okay. So Lauren
Yes.
and Darlene votes yes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, 2.
502.
Okay, great. We have no public waiting in the waiting room or to make any type of comment, so we'll jump over public input and move. So the next budget agenda items are district meeting planning, a remote learning update, a financial update, and a school board update. And I feel like all of those things are going to get a little bit commingled because as we kind of just talk through and work through some things. So we'll try to keep it in that order, but I think a lot of things are going to get kind of cross-addressed as we go through the agenda. So I listed the district meeting first because it's the thing we missed first that kind of led us through all of this. And I asked Drew to attend this evening because there's been some correspondence going back and forth as a result of the 2 postponements that we've had. And I wanted Drew to kind of share and speak to kind of where we are with that. It's been an ongoing process. It's continuing on. Legal counsel is involved about what we can and can't do. So Drew, I would ask you to if you could kind of summarize where we are with district meeting planning, that would be great.
Sure. At this point, the co-op meeting is scheduled, right, that's in quotes, for Tuesday, the 26th of May, with a second day of the 27th if we need it. At this point, the stay-at-home order is scheduled to expire on Monday, and the state of emergency is scheduled to expire on the May 14th, I believe. The governor today announced that he will tomorrow announce what's going to go forward. Reading, this was just a newspaper article, but the hint I got out of that suggested that the stay-at-home order for Hillsborough County will probably stay in place. But I don't have any idea for how long. In that context, let's see. Our attorney, Jim O'Shaughnessy, has been trying to work on a procedure that will allow us to move forward. Oh, I also wanted to insert, if you look at the various emergency orders, including Order 38, there is authority for the schools to spend money based on last year's budget with a few modifications that I'm sure that the budget committee will dig into. So the world doesn't stop if we don't have an annual meeting by the end of June. But Andy is very anxious, and I know that the school board is very anxious to find a way to move forward. And what Jim has come up with, it's very much a draft. It's very much under discussion, very tentative, is finding a way to have essentially a 2-session meeting where the first one would be deliberation and amendments, and the second one would be essentially a drive-by vote on all of the articles. If you think SB2, it's sort of like that and sort of not. My thinking is that the all-day vote is quite workable. I'm still struggling with how we could make discussion and voting on amendments work and still keep social distance. The proposal that Jim came forward with involved people being in their cars in the parking lot, setting the school board, the budget committee, and the moderator up on the hill above the parking lot, right by the softball field, and having microphones and assistants to deal with different groups of voters and so on. There may be something in there we can figure out how to work. An all Zoom meeting is possible if we had somebody who had a big enough subscription.
So one of the things I mentioned to Mark, who's here running all of our
Yeah.
technology here, is that when I set this meeting up, there was a little message that went across the bottom of the screen that said, have a large group, and I thought it said over 1,000.
Yeah.
Consider making this a webinar. So I don't know if what that advantages and disadvantages Zoom offers in that kind of webinar setting, but that might be worth investigating.
Since you mentioned that, if I click on the live stream on the website, it tells me it can't connect to the server. But
Okay,
anyway.
Mark's gonna check into that from based on his reaction.
Since you brought that up.
Oh, well, Mark can see you from the live stream, so I don't know. Anyway.
Right.
Okay.
There are a variety of ways to deal with discussion for large groups. The problem comes when you need to vote, because the voting needs to be done by registered voters, and if we need to actually count and so on, and God help us if somebody wants a secret ballot vote on any of that stuff, and so on. Some of you may have read about the town meeting for the town of Bow. What they're doing involves the school board deciding ahead of time what amendments will be allowed. And Jim doesn't like that at all. That seems ripe for trouble. So we're talking around it. and I don't know where we're going to go, and I don't know when we would do it. The town is currently scheduled their annual meeting for Saturday, May 30th. And I was at the select board meeting this past Monday, and they had no interest in a two session meeting at all. They wanted to have a traditional meeting, and it's not clear to me how that could happen with social distancing.
Drew, did they have an actual selectmen's meeting, or did they do like a Zoom meeting like that?
It was a Zoom meeting. There were Laurie and Mark and David Petrie were in the room, and Susan Benz and Peter Band were on Zoom.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the thinking, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, but we don't have a solid proposal. We just have ideas. What I'm concerned about in terms of finding a way to move forward, I don't know the limits of the budgetary authority if we can't have a meeting, can't find a way to have a meeting, and you'd have to dig into the details of Order 38. We have a labor contract that's outstanding, and I imagine all the parties want to find some way to actually vote on it. And special ed is always a wild card. If we all of a sudden get a couple of students that have severe needs, we're in a world of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So the articles there that deal with funding special education are important.
Right. Okay.
Drew, what's the rule now for posting? If we don't have it on the 26th, what's going to happen?
Well, if I postpone it, it would be the same thing as before. I have to pick a date and time and place certain, and decide when it would be. Was that your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't another, at this point, there wasn't any kind of 15-30 day posting requirement.
No, and my reading is that for all the posting of the warrants, all that stuff is deemed to have already happened and
Right.
doesn't have to be redone.
That's what I thought. It
Some
just seems
of the
like it's been
recommendations,
forever.
some of the recommendations from legal counsel included things like having some public forums in advance of whatever meeting date actually, and then by public forum, it could be a Zoom format like this,
Yeah.
but having some type of public forum in advance of the meeting. I think, Cindy, to get to your point, that all of this and all the public hearings that needed to be done by statute, we've met all of those requirements, but it just happened so long ago, it kind of gets people back in sync with what we're putting forward and why it's being put forward.
Any discussion that can happen ahead of the meeting will just help keep the meeting shorter. But any meeting like this is going to take forever.
Yeah. And so we're out of, as I mentioned, there's been correspondence going back and forth, and so if anyone has any ideas, if you want to think about it and submit some ideas of how we might be able to manage it, that would be great. I think it just continues to be so much uncertainty with what we can and can't do, but we've been throwing around a couple of different ideas, and like as Drew said, we're looking to Bo because they kind of did this kind of drive-through voting and things like that, and there were ways that it appeared it could work, but that district also had a less complicated warrant to be voted on. So
is the date kind of towards the end of June where we're really targeting to have the meeting by? Like, what's that date that we really need to have this by before things get more complicated?
Well,
I
teacher
don't think there
contracts are over June 30th, so.
June 30th? Okay.
So
Yeah.
Kelly, I think, Kelly, was there a sidebar reached with the teachers union that said, or originally we were working with April 15th as a deadline, which that teachers' contracts needed and notices of renewals needed to be issued. My understanding was there was some type of an agreement because the RSA states that it's April 15th or by 2 weeks after the date that a budget is passed. So the teachers accepted that as the wording of the statute, but I don't know what that means as we approach July 1st or end of school year and then start another.
Well, I think that the 15-day goes into effect when we vote, but
Right.
the thing that we're concerned about, or I'm concerned about, is everybody else that had their town meetings, their new contracts start on July 1st.
Right.
And so we have nothing to offer for July 1st until we have the budget approved.
That's true. I mean, all of the teachers have, I mean, I don't think there's anything in writing, but the unions have agreed that they will happily, at the moment, wait for us to approve a budget, and then they would expect their contracts, in the 15 days that follow. So I don't know. At this point, they're fine with the May 26th date. I don't know if we go later, how that looks with them.
And then from just a payment perspective, we issue the teachers balloon checks with the second pay period in June, correct?
Yeah, well, it's actually on the last teacher day. We've negotiated with them that we'll pay them out on the 19th.
Okay.
Everyone's fine with the balloon checks on that date. Yeah.
So those balloon checks essentially equal 5 pay periods, which are that last pay period, that second pay period in June, and the 4 that would take place over the summer until the actual school year begins.
Well, yeah, they'll get 2 paychecks in June, and then the balloon check that represents 4 payments. Yeah. And that's all FY20 money. So, that doesn't have anything to do with FY21. And their first paycheck for FY21, I believe, is actually this year in September. So.
Okay. Well, I think the governor's announcement tomorrow will kind of most immediately pave the way for the time frame, because I was going to say with the stay-at-home order, we couldn't. I don't even know how.
Well, we could certainly do the voting day.
Right.
That's not a problem with even under the current order. It's how do we have a discussion and do voting on amendments and so on. And that's the challenge.
Right, because anyone that logs into a Zoom meeting, you would have to be able to verify them as registered voters. And
well, plus if you have 2 people on the same computer and so on,
right. Okay, well, to be continued. Like I said, if anyone has any additional ideas, pass them along, or if they hear of anything from any district. That we aren't the only district, and Bow isn't the only other district. There are, and this will be a situation for the town of Hollis as well, because I don't know that the school is going to be available to hold a traditional town meeting, or if the state's order, the emergency orders, are going to be able to allow that to happen by the end of May. So maybe
and they have 2 labor contracts.
They do. And the difference with their contract, their budget, is that they're a calendar year, not a fiscal year. So what they do after they make all the adjustments after everything is passed. So yeah. So okay, well, more information to come. And again, any suggestions are welcome. So
Darlene,
yes.
quick question. Is this meeting today limited to 1 hour?
No.
Okay, so at 1 hour point, it's not going to cut off.
No.
Okay.
The Zoom platform expanded the lengths of the meetings for school districts. So since I'm hosting the meeting using my school district Gmail account, it's part of that kind of school package, and we can continue talking. So.
Because I was at a similar meeting earlier this week and it cut off at the 1 hour point. So just
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next item, which was a remote learning update. So, so this was intended to give everybody a sense of just where remote learning is right now, and there are obviously financial discussions and some information that Andy partially addressed in the email correspondence I included with the agenda. So they just wanted to kind of remind everybody that all of the education across the SAU is taking place in a remote environment, and that's continuing through the end of the school year. The boards just met yesterday, and Cindy, keep me honest on the dates and timeframes. Seniors in co-op are finished on May 22nd. They'll have some type of senior week. I don't know exactly what that means, but that continues the next week. And all other assignments and learning, delivery of education continues through June 5th. And then the next week from the 8th to the 12th is going to be kind of a wind down time where kids can finish assignments, work with teachers to just close out things for the year. Students can empty lockers, get things from their if they're in elementary school, from their elementary schools. All those dates are going to be hashed out with the individual schools, but that everything with the kids will be done by June 12th. And then Kelly, you said the last day for teachers is the 19th. 17th of June.
Yes,
Okay.
17th.
And so the teachers kind of, wrap things up across their departments and things like that by the 17th of June. So that's where we are with that. There was a survey put out in the middle of March when we first thought we were kind of getting to this scenario. And if any families had technology needs, they identified what their needs were, and Chromebooks were issued and things like that, so that the kids have what they need at home to be able to participate in their classes and get their work done. And I know there are probably extensive meetings going on across the entire SAU, just within the co-op, across teachers and all, to deliver the best product that they can to the students. So that's continuing. And there are naturally some things that come to mind as a result of kind of shutting down the physical schools and moving forward with the remote environment. So Andy, similarly, in doing that, aside from the impacts it has just most immediately to our own budget, what we are and aren't spending, the state and federal government have different pots of money that are available that have not yet been defined per school district. We hear a lot of conflicting information of what is and isn't available. So there will be funds from the CARES Act and funds available potentially from FEMA for PPE, if we need masks, gloves, things like that, medical equipment. There might be FEMA funds available for things like that. So I think Andy mentioned in his summary that kind of some of the high points, and I asked Kelly just some other questions to address with regard to kind of just budget items, like what's the most immediate impact to staff, or how are we paying staff, like hourly staff and things like that. I'll just quickly go over the things Andy mentioned, and then Kelly, if you can jump in on some of the other things I kind of sent to you earlier in the email from Andy. He mentions that for spring sports, since they're obviously not occurring, we're not paying the stipends to coaches, right, Kelly?
That is correct.
And we will have to either refund any of the pay-to-play fees that were collected in the spring, if they were paid in like the February, early March timeframe. So they are potentially held for families to use for the fall, but otherwise we're going to have to come up with a mechanism to refund families for that. Kelly, you can speak to maybe some of the other items like managing of purchase orders, where we are with some of our contract items like transportation, special education, and things like that.
Oh, you want me to do that right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Yeah, the bus contract, we're still under negotiations and working with the school boards to determine what we can negotiate with them right now. So I don't have a firm answer on that. We hope that we'll get something, but I don't have any information on that.
So just a quick question, Kelly, that bus company is doing all of our would have been our provider for regular and special education?
Yes, they do everything for us, and we're not utilizing them at all. If we need,
so any of the the meal prep and meals that are available, they're not being delivered by the buses, those are pickup only.
They're
so
picked up at 2 locations. Yeah, just at 2 locations, and we are utilizing our vans for other things, like there are a handful of special ed students that are in one of our buildings, 2 of our buildings, I believe, and they're used to pick those students out for services that can't be done remotely.
Okay. Are we still, so for our special education like the contracts with any out of district placements or any service providers?
We are negotiating with those people as well. In some cases, we will not be able to reduce that, and in some cases we will. There are services that are not being delivered just because of the circumstances, so we will have to deal with that at some point as well.
Okay, and so there is potential, I don't know how you gauge the potential risk of any kind of compensatory damages because those services aren't being provided. I'm not sure what kind of sign-off parents need to provide to acknowledge that, or what risk we might have for that.
Well, it's all about the student's IEP, so we can't really change an IEP. That is pretty much set in stone. So if we're not delivering services that are specified in there for whatever the reason, we have to figure out how to make that happen. And Amy has done a lot of work in evaluating that, and those costs could be very high. She's on that right now.
Okay. Okay. So
I had a question.
Go ahead, Raul.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. So does that mean that the cost of special ed will be higher than it would have been otherwise under normal conditions? Or
possibly? Well, yes, and I think that it probably will be higher both in FY20 and in FY21, because we will be able to deliver some of those services in FY20, but many of them are going to end up being in July and August, which, you know, is a whole another year. So we're working on all of that right now, but I do suspect that we'll get hit pretty hard in FY21, especially with additional compensatory costs. We've got ESY to worry about because it's starting early this year. For the co-op, it's probably about $20K a week more. So, and we also believe there's a student or 2 that may be moving into the district that could be of significant costs. I don't know if that will affect FY20, but very definitely will affect FY21.
Excuse me, remind me what ESY is?
That's the extended school year, and that happens every summer. It usually starts in the second week in July and goes to the first week in August, I believe it is. And that's what we budget for. But we can't, by law, have too many days between the end of school in June and the beginning of ESY. So because school is ending a week-ish early, then it's we're going to have an extra week of ESY.
So on balance, do you expect any additional cost on special ed to be absorbed by some of the other areas where we're not spending? Or do you expect in net that the cost will go up?
Well, I think
Across everything.
it's hard to say right now, but my gut tells me we're going to end up spending more in FY20 than we're going to save.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Kelly, can you talk a little bit about the food service? What's happening with that? Just, are the meals free? Are we charging families? Are we covering costs? How many meals are being served? You just kind of just
Yep.
high level information.
Yep, absolutely. We are not charging families anything, and we do have waivers from the state so that any meals that we do provide are covered by the state as reimbursable meals. And we started in the co-op with about 22 meals a day, and we're up to 40 now, and it could go higher as the month goes on and as it goes on in May and June. We have 8 staff members across all 3 districts working on preparing meals in 2 locations. So the middle school is one of the locations, and there are 4 people that work there, and then RMMS is the other location, and 4 people are working there.
Okay.
Looks like we have applied for a $3,000 grant. I think that's in each district. And we haven't heard if we have received it. We expect to probably use all of the inventory we have in all of the schools to provide meals, but we should be able to provide all the meals without purchasing too many things. We will have to purchase milk. That is one of the purchases that we're making, but and some paper supplies. But fortunately, we have had some donations come in from the Brookline Lions Club for one, and we are getting government money for produce. So that all in all, it's going to work out that we're not going to be spending too much money on supplies and food. The cost will be in our workers and not having any income, any revenue coming in for their salaries. So the potential is that we could go over the fund balance that the food service has in co-op, but it has a pretty strong one. So, I'm somewhat confident that we will not go into the general fund with the cost for the food service.
And does that continue just until the end of the school year?
Yes.
Last student day?
12th will be the last day that we serve food.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about our hourly staff and how they're being utilized and how we're managing their salaries?
Yes, all 3 boards felt it was very important that we tried to keep them all as whole as possible in terms of paying them. However, with the caveat that you have to work in order to get paid. So in general, no one is working. I mean, no one is getting paid without working. And so that means I'll just go down the types of employees and you can get a sense of what everyone's doing. Secretaries are working part remote and part in the office, mostly remote. They'll come into the office and get what they need. They may have 1 or 2 days that they come in for a certain number of hours, but for the most part, they're working remotely. Our paras are almost all working remotely. They are servicing students by doing that, and when they're not doing that, they have the opportunity to do professional development that we require, that in many times we can never really get to that professional development. So this has been sort of a bonus there, that we can get a lot of the training in that we need to have done. There are a handful of students that are coming into two buildings, I believe it is, and the paras come in and service them just for things that can't be done remotely. Our custodial staff are all working, and they're doing a lot of maintenance projects in addition to cleaning, of course, because there's a lot. There are people that come in by appointment only, but they still come in, and then the custodians need to do cleaning behind them. But they're doing a lot of painting, lots of painting in the high school, especially. Other maintenance projects like ceiling tiles and repair of windows. They're going outside in our fields and getting that started. So they're doing a lot of things that sort of on that you don't have time to do list. So it's been another bonus to have those people available to do those things, and then they'll start on their normal summer work as we get it, as the remote learning ends. And then the food service workers, like I said, there's 8 across all of the 3 districts that are providing meals for the students. And when they're not doing that, they have opportunity for doing professional development work. And some of them are even filling their entire hours with custodial work as well. And some of them have decided just not to be paid, and they're not working and they're not getting paid. And all of our hourly staff, there are some that qualify for the CARES Act leave that some are taking advantage of that.
That was my next question, so thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, right. So that's sort of a rundown of how all of the categories of our hourly staff are doing. And for the most part, we are paying them and they are working.
Okay. Great. Well, that was a great summary. It gives us a real sense for how things are going. And I'm just going to, central office staff is mostly remote at this point.
Yeah, we are. Well, there's a couple people that are there more than not. But they're probably about the only ones there. And then we have certain periods of time when the business office comes in so that they can complete payroll and pay bills and whatnot. But we are trying to, make sure there's social distancing and scheduling it so that there are just a handful of people, 1 or 2 in the SAU at any given time.
Okay. Okay, so does anyone have any other questions about how remote learning is proceeding and the impacts? I mean, hopefully, Kelly, by the end of May, since we'll be kind of approaching the school year, I'll have a better sense of financial impacts.
Right. I would hope to have it towards the end of May as we get many unanswered questions answered. That's my goal.
Yeah, and hopefully by then we'll have a sense from the state of the CARES funding. I know there was a special, a remote learning special education grant that was just announced, I think, for the co-op. Kelly, was that $10,000?
I think it was 7, actually.
Okay, 7. It was based on the student population. So,
right.
But there's, I think there was a larger request for information about kind of remote learning related expenses across probably every category that you just mentioned, transportation, salaries, technology, things like that.
Right.
Even like purchasing, I don't know if there were extra Zoom licenses, if you have electronic signature software, all kinds of things like that.
Yep.
And so they're be looking at how the CARES funding breaks out, and I would say hopefully by May we would have a definite.
I'm hoping, but I don't have a lot of faith in the fact that we'll get a lot of money because it's supposed to be based on your Title I funding, like 80 to 85% of that, and so for us that's probably about, if that's what they do, that's probably about $20,000, and I think our total on that survey that you mentioned was more like $200,000-300,000. So I don't think it's have a huge impact on our expenses are.
And I guess as you look forward to how, I know there's so many discussions that need to take place to end the year, let alone how you start the year. But, you know, and what kind of PPE you need for staff and students and things like that.
Oh,
So,
yes, I spent a big chunk of my day today trying to find a source of PPE that is, you know, not,
reasonable.
yeah, reasonable time and reasonable cost. So it's not easy to find.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone have any other questions with regard to remote learning?
Any infected staff or employees that we're aware of?
I'm not aware of any, no.
Thank you.
There is a, New Hampshire DHHS has a map that they update pretty regularly by town that shows, I don't really know if it's probably reported cases. I don't ever see the numbers going down. So as people recover, I don't see the numbers changing. But the last time I saw that, the notice was, I think, 5 reported cases for Hollis and 7 reported cases for Brookline. But that's just to put into the perspective for the total that's been reported for the state. But that's just, I just usually Google like New Hampshire DHHS COVID-19 and a map of the whole state comes out by town. So. Okay. So the next item I have is the financial update. And so this was, Kelly asked about having the results for the month, and I said that that really wasn't necessary at this point. There are a lot of unknowns and a lot of work going on. So I think, again, wait until May is probably the better time frame for that. But when I want to just address some of the other things that Andy listed in his email, most specifically for the fields themselves, which is that, well, they're ironically getting rested, which is something we never can do with the fields. So here we are with that. But Andy mentioned that there are still some punch list items to finish on the turf field itself, finishing some landscaping, sign installation, paving items, installing a scoreboard. And he made note of a specific donation by, I believe that's a Hollis family. The Defoes are donating $300,000 to the purchase of lights for the field, specifically to be used for that purpose. Cindy, did the board accept the donation? Oh, I guess it went to HB Elevate, and then the board has to accept it from, no?
Because it was a new agenda item, we discussed it last night. We vote on it in May.
Ah, okay. So there has to be a board acceptance, and then the work can proceed.
Yeah, I think Andy's been in contact with the family and, you know, trying to set a plan, but it hopefully will be done over the summer.
Okay, great. Okay, and okay, the last item on Andy's list was with regard to just paving in general, which was something that was put into the FY21 budget. So I that they would be working with Hollis DPW on the bidding to hopefully improve the pricing, but that work would continue at some point over the summer, which gets to a question. Oh, Kelly, I know what I wanted to ask you. This would be a good time during the financial update. So a lot of impacts to just, you know, economic impacts in general and how they affect families and whatnot. I'm not sure everyone's aware, because I couldn't recall that we ever spoke about it as a budget committee, with how cash flows to the school district work. So there's concern that we don't have a budget. There's concern because of, you know, economic impacts to both communities due to the, you know, unemployment and people being out of work and things like that, and what impact that has on the taxes that are due in July and at the end of the year in the November timeframe. And then naturally there's a concern about how does that affect how the school gets its funding. So Kelly, can you just talk a little bit to how the school gets funded?
Right. So, the budget is approved, which obviously it hasn't been yet. But in the summer, I give I give the towns a schedule of how we'd like to get paid, and that's usually based on, bond payments that we have, and different times of the year, like the balloon check, money grubber. So I give them a schedule, and I have nothing on that schedule for the last few months because that gets determined in October when the tax rates are set. So they have a schedule to start the year, and they pay us based on that schedule. And then about I think it's February or March, now that we know what the tax rate what the tax rate is, I will complete that schedule, and then they'll continue to pay until the end of the year, and the cycle starts all over again.
And then intermixed with that are other like adequacy aid payments and things like
Yes.
that.
And that all comes electronically from the state, and we've received everything for FY20 at this point in the year that we would normally get from the state. I've not heard any information at all if there's any adjustments to be expected for FY21.
Mm-hmm. And so the other piece of information, which I think is just interesting, is that kind of the order of magnitude maybe about how the needs are met. So basically the towns are obligated to pay the school districts first. Is that a good way of putting it?
Well, they can't not pay us, let's say.
They can't not pay us. Okay, that's a better
If they, for any reason, can't pay us, then it's their responsibility to borrow money or find the funding in some way to make sure that they pay the schools.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, has either of the town administrators brought any concerns to you or Andy's attention with regard to cash flows or things like that?
I know Andy had a brief discussion with Tad, and Tad didn't think there was going to be a problem for the first half of the year, perhaps the second half, but most people have their taxes through their mortgages, so he didn't think there was going to be an issue for a while anyway. And I did talk to Rachel at the town, and she said basically the same thing, that she didn't anticipate any issues. And then she reiterated, and even if there were issues, we still have to pay you because of the way the law reads.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Much better, Raul.
So I guess that was kind of one of the questions that was asked kind of just in preparation for the meeting, was just how we plan on, we don't have a budget. So I guess this dovetails off of the, I mean, hopefully by July 1st we do, and it's in place and it's all good and we just proceed like normal. But Kelly, can you share any information about kind of the point that was made in the executive order that Drew mentioned, which was that we can operate if July 1st, if we pass July 1st and still don't have a budget, how do we operate? Do we operate it up to the level of funding we had, or begin spending based on the level of the prior budget, or?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, for instance, the professional staff has a contract that we are obligated to pay, so I would imagine we'd have to pay them based on that. That means if we went with this year's budget, something has to give in order to make those salaries.
Right. I mean, and it's all in anticipation of passing a budget.
Right. Well, and as you know, we have this very tiny window of doing a lot of work in the summer too. So we are right now gathering quotes and everything we need as if we had the budget that we expected.
Right.
Just we don't want to fall behind on that. And then assuming that we have a budget, we'll be prepared to go into the summer and finish those projects. But we also are telling vendors that, yeah, well, this may not happen either, but we're trying to be prepared for if it does. I mean, beyond that, I don't know that we've planned a lot because we're hoping that we'll have the budget at least that we need to pay people.
Mhm. Okay. And kind of, again, dovetailing off of what we'll know, better information that we'll have in May, is there any anticipation at this time that the board would potentially recommend an adjustment or amendment to the budget we had planned on proposing based on the current situation and, you know, additional, kind of foreseeing additional expenses or anything like that? I mean, nothing, no one has raised it as a concern yet.
I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if Cindy can speak to that.
We haven't discussed that at all.
Okay.
And I assume that if that were to happen, that would somebody be going to the mic or to make the amendment there, but there hasn't been any discussion of it.
Okay. Okay, anyone have any other kind of questions on those kind of financial items? I think one thing to just kind of keep in mind too, as we're approaching year end is, and I know you carefully monitor it, Kelly, is looking at kind of our fund balances and kind of, again, we'll have such a better sense as these next few weeks go by, but looking at our fund balances and being able to kind of reconcile where we've overspent due to remote learning, underspent due to remote learning, have risks due to, you know, compensatory damages or special education needs, and then looking at the level of our retained fund balance, meeting the obligation that we expect to meet to return money to the taxpayers, which we typically have exceeded recently, but you know, I mean, it just becomes an area of that kind of the financial management picture, which is meeting the obligation of what we said we would return to taxpayers, and what potential risks do we have, what needs to be encumbered, things like that. I think there just needs to be kind of really carefully assessed.
Oh, definitely. We're closing all the POs that we can, and you know, the anticipated spending is different when you're in remote learning than when you're in the building. So
Right.
there are savings that we will get from closing many POs, but there are also costs, as many you just mentioned, that will offset those as well. So that's why I am a little concerned that we'll end up, you know, when everything is factored in, it appears to me right now, in terms of my gut feeling, that we will likely have higher expenses than we will save on money.
Okay. Anyone else have any kind of direct financial issues or questions they'd like to raise at this time?
Darlene, I was thinking that we need to maybe create a chart or two that highlights all these risk areas for the briefing. And then we need to highlight whether the arrows going up or down. That way there is a sense of all the key factors. There's a lot of good explanation and rationale behind what the costs are. But I think, I tell you, if it weren't for the fact that, for example, Kelly's explanation tonight, as well as the notes that Andy wrote in the email, you know, most people think that, hey, nothing's happening, we're going to get a big savings, and that is not likely to happen. So we need to maintain track of all the reasons why things are the way they are.
Yeah, I think there are going to need to be just a little bit of time spent on that at whenever we have the district meeting,
Right.
because I think you're going to hear, you know, things from both sides. I think people might think, as you just said, there were all these savings, so let's put those savings into next year, kind of not understanding that. Well, we don't the savings don't, that's not how our budgeting works. We don't get to kind of save the money and put it out later, and,
I'll be glad to help you or help anybody else if we want to have a sidebar discussion and maybe draft some material.
yeah, that would be great.
Well, and I am being very conservative here too, because if we have a very good negotiation with the bus contract, we might get more back than what I'm thinking. But I just don't want to get everyone feeling, too much happy Kool-Aid there.
I mean, at a minimum, I haven't seen the wording of the contract itself, and so I'm glad there's at least an opportunity to go back and look at it and see if there's something obviously that can be saved. And I understand all the issues with not wanting to furlough drivers, because of the issues with having licensed drivers and the shortages and all of that. But I mean, at the very least, those buses aren't running. And I know that there's just general maintenance that can be done, but they don't need to be maintained in the same way. And even though gas prices are really good, they're not using gas that is, part of the pricing that they charge us. So I mean,
no, actually, the gas is on us, so we're saving money there, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Well, there goes that idea.
But that's the kind of insight I want to be able to capture, because those questions may come up at the district meeting and people need to understand that minor detail.
Right. Great. Awesome. Thanks so much, Kelly. I know there's just a ton of work going into managing all of this and kind of trying to keep track of it all. And
doing it all from home.
Yeah. Cindy, I know you guys had a long, pretty sizable agenda at the school board meeting last night. I'm not sure if we've hit high points, low points, or which points we've hit at this point. So anything that you'd like to share that we might have might not have covered yet?
Yeah, I've got the agenda here since it was just last night as well. So I'll just touch on a couple of things. Not everything will be financial related, but obviously the transportation contract is a huge issue for us. We've been in discussions with Andy, and Andy's been in discussions with them. So hopefully we'll get some kind of resolve on that in the next couple of weeks. The remote learning, I can't say enough for the SAU office and the administrators. The job that they're doing, it's unbelievable. And they just took it and ran basically with 2 days off before they had it up and running. I think for the most part, everyone is pretty content with the way things are going. Obviously, you're always going to have some that aren't. It's very difficult, and things have had to be adjusted a little bit, because when you're a school board for the middle school and high school, you don't think about the elementary schools, and some of these families have 4 kids at home trying to use Zoom. So it's but everybody's being pretty good. Gina is staying on top of conversation with the families, conversation with the administrators and the teachers. They did a survey recently, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, kind of asking the families what they felt, whether they thought they had too much, too little, and they made some adjustments. And again, some of that was just individual based on how many kids are in a family trying to use the internet. There's things that, you just don't think about as a remote learning for all the time, instead of just a class here or there. So I just can't say enough for them. Andy and Gina and Bob Thompson and Amy have worked tirelessly on the administrative as far as the educational side. And of course, Kelly and Linda are crazy trying to keep the financial side running. So I can't say enough of appreciation for them as well. As far as the school, they're going. The boys, they think that they're almost completing the master schedule at the high school. They're just moving forward as if this is a typical school year, in addition to all the remote learning that they're doing.
Yes.
So they're working very well on the transition from 6 to 7 and 8 to 9, which is always a difficult transition during any time, let alone this stressful time for the kids. Rick thinks that he'll have the tentative schedule. You know how it is if you've had a high school student, it changes after they get their schedule and decide they want to add and drop. But he'll have a rough estimate for us on some class sizes in our next meeting, he thought. The other thing Darlene touched on was the turf field. We can't be thankful enough to this family for donating the funds to get the lights going for us. And that frees up money that we have in HB Elevates. So we have, Brian has been looking at bids for bleachers. He's found a company in Florida that does, basically they go take down old bleachers when schools are done with them and want to put up new bleachers. So they go and get the ones that they're getting rid of. So he's found a company that looks like install and everything without a press box would be around 85,000, as opposed to what we were looking at earlier for 1,000 seats. It was around 300K. So that's something that we're excited about and plan on moving, forward with looking into this more. He gave us the bids last night, and the two other bids obviously were much higher because they were all new bleachers. The only other thing we talked about was the co-op annual meeting, we didn't talk about it at length because I know Darlene and Holly and Drew have been working on that. We touched on it, but and still expect it to be the 26th if at all possible. The only other thing that we did was we voted and discussed the breakfast prices, and Kelly may want to touch on that, but we kind of address this every year around this time.
Right, we just are requesting that the breakfast prices be increased from $1.50 to $1.75, and this is driven by the increasing cost of fruit. The cost was happening before our lovely circumstance now, so we would have been asking for this no matter what. And Amy does a great job. She just needs a little more. It's especially important in the co-op to get that increase, and I believe they approved that, right, Cindy?
Yes, they did. And the other thing, of course, is the disappointing experience for the seniors. They're looking at how they can have a prom and a graduation. They're working with student council and administration and a couple of the school board members who have students who are seniors, trying to address something as of right now. And since we don't know really what the moving forward is going to be as far as the mandates and the stay-at-home orders, they are still acting as though it will be in June. But they have some different plans if they can't. The prom obviously was in May, and that's not going to happen. They do already have the same venue reserved for July, which the venue would allow them to do. But if they don't have a plan in place by June 1st, they will have to give up that venue. So, but they did reschedule, I believe, Mary, our student representative said July 23rd. And graduation, the same thing. They're trying to, figure out how to do it. There's a lot of discussion about what can be done and how it can be done. A couple of things that came up last night was one, possibly splitting up the class into different fields so that they could spread out and maybe have a group of 50, in each field around the school campus, because we do have a lot of open space. But nothing's been decided, nothing's been determined. I would think that whatever we do, I would think that the cost will be different than it typically is for a high school graduation. So that may be something that we're going to hear about in the future, is what this is all going to cost.
Cindy, was that the first meeting you guys have had since, or did you meet in March, or?
We had a, after the full order was put in place, we had a live meeting that we all attended with distance, because the we'd already posted it, and in order to be able to have it, because there were some things that we were wanting to discuss, the bus contract was one thing that they started with. And then we've had one remote meeting since then. And we do anticipate we'll probably meet in a couple of weeks, because there's a few things that are going to need to be discussed and talked about before the end of May. So I think the 13th was a date that was thrown out, but nothing's been set yet.
Okay. Anyone have any other things they'd like to bring up at this point? We made a remarkably good time after addressing a lot of issues, and we're way ahead of schedule, even though we started late. So, does anyone have anything else to address at this point? Okay, so we'll keep everybody posted on the status of the district meeting. I was just looking at dates. If we were to meet on the 4th Thursday in May, that would be May 28th, which if we had a meeting on the 26th and 27th, we wouldn't meet on the 28th. And I'm thinking maybe just to get a general sense of where we are with things, we might want to consider just May 21st, which is the 3rd Thursday, as our next meeting date. I didn't, when we reorganized, I didn't address kind of just general kind of parameters, like does the 4th Thursday still work for everybody? Like, I just feel like since we haven't figured things out, like with the budget and the district meeting, we kind of can't get into, and again, it's happening like our 4th Thursday, as I just said, would be right in line with the district meeting. So as it stands right now. So if we don't have a district meeting on the 26th and 27th, we can go with the 28th for our meeting. And if we are, then we might want to just go with the 21st to get a better sense of things before leading into that meeting. So I'll just ask for everybody's flexibility as we look at the end of May and consider a meeting for May.
I'm fairly available.
Yeah,
Gives
that
us
works
all
for
something
me.
to do, right? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. And if there are no other items, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:57 p.m.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
From Raul, seconded by
I'll second.
Brian. All those in favor of adjournment, Tom,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Raul,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Darlene votes yes. Great. Thank you all so much. Again, I appreciate your time, your flexibility as we were a little late to get started. This actually worked. And, thanks so much. I'll keep you all apprised as I kind of get more information and we come up with a plan. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much, Darlene,
All
for
right.
great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.